Scotland.
Now, you mentioned the minutiae. Jim McLean, Michael Bruce, Bill Davis, umpteen others, making a point that how can you be a separate autonomous party when actually in terms of the electoral registration rules, you are just an accounting unit of the UK Labour Party. They give a quote from the Electoral Commission. The Commission does not hold a constitution for the Scottish Labour Party per se, since they are not separately registered with us. The Labour Party is registered for GB as a whole. That isn't going to change, is it?
I think your readers there have been reading Wings Over Scotland, where this is a topic of great interest.
Quite probably. What's the answer, though?
Well, I've said to you a few times, I'm not advocating for a separate Scottish Labour Party. That's quite important. This is a stronger Scottish Labour Party, better equipped to represent Scotland within the UK Labour family.
But not autonomous in the sense of being a separate party registered with the Electoral Commission?
Well, we are a separate accounting unit.
Yes.
We have to provide our own accounts and reports in the way that you would expect us to. We appear on a ballot paper as the Scottish Labour Party. That is beyond all doubt. But like I say to you, I want to be part of that wider UK Labour movement. That's
but the point of these guys is you appear on the ballot as Scottish Labour, but you're an accounting unit of the wider Labour Party. It is the Labour Party that is registered, and it means that it is the Labour Party's manifesto upon which you must stand, not necessarily an autonomous Scottish manifesto.
So I've seen this debated over Twitter over the past few days, and a few people linked to that website, which I don't consider particularly reputable.
No, but what's the answer?
I was going to say to you, a few people went to the Electoral Commission. A few journalists went to the Electoral Commission and said any suggestion that the Scottish Labour Party couldn't have different policy positions because of what's on that website was utter nonsense. It was completely refuted by the Electoral Commission. Right,
let's talk about let's stick with that policy question then, the idea of policies. Say you have a distinct policy in Scotland on, say it's Trident or it's national insurance or whatever it is, different from the policy that's held south of the border, and you go to, not a Scottish election, I understand control of devolved policy matters, you go to a UK election, you couldn't have two policies on Trident north and south of the border when you're standing all to be elected as Labour members in the United Kingdom House of Commons.
So I think it's very important that the Scottish Labour Party sets out its own policy direction. And there may be occasions where we choose to take a different path from the rest of the UK party. So what happens in that situation? I've heard people say, how are you going to make sure it's absolutely clear to people what they're voting for?
Yes.
What I would say to that is, this is not a brand new concept. This happens in European countries all the time, particularly in countries that have a more sort of federal system of operation. There are two different ways that you can approach this. One is on the proactive cases. So, for example, a manifesto. Everybody expects to know what's in the detail of the manifesto, where there might be different positions. You go through a process, and this is referenced in the statement that I put together with Jeremy Corbyn, where the SAC and the NEC and other various stakeholders will work through the detail of that.
And so there would be a single manifesto position that everyone, at a UK general election, you'd be standing on a single manifesto. So you could, the Scottish Party, let's use Trident as the example, since it's the one that's been...
It's the hypothetical one.
I'd rather talk about national insurance. I'm not disagreeing.
Welfare's a good one.
Okay, well, let's say that then. Say you have a different policy on national insurance. Scottish Party has decided it wants to scrap it, merge it entirely with the tax system. The party south of the border says, no, keep national insurance. You seem to think that's a good idea. But party south of the border says, no, we're going to keep national insurance. How do you resolve? You cannot go to the election with the party in Scotland saying, we're going to scrap national insurance, and then whoopie-doo, there's 200 MPs elected from south of the border, and they say, no, that's not happening. You have to reconcile that in advance, don't you? So the electorate know what they're going to get if they elect a Labour government.
Can I just say, to put beyond all doubt, I'm not about to scrap national insurance.
Use Trident if you wish.
I can use both examples. So, in a situation where you're talking about manifestos, where there's a proactive body of work there, then yes, you would go through the process to get to an agreed position. And that would be very clearly resolved and everybody would know. The other side of this, though, is there might be occasions where you can't wait months and months to have a manifesto. You have to be more reactive to events, to a vote in Parliament or whatever else. And likewise, you'd have to have a position in place, a mechanism in place to work through the detail of that. But like I say to you, Brian...
But to reach a common position, you wouldn't then be offering competing positions?
Well, if you look at what happens in some European countries, where there is a conflict that can't be resolved by any other means, what you get to is a point of agreement agreed abstention on a particularly controversial issue. That's one way in one country of how you might tackle this. But I understand that there's a degree of work still to be done here. The statement I signed with Jeremy Corbyn recognises that we need to task people within our movement just to work out very clearly what the protocol in these instances would be. But I take you back to the fact, Brian, I think this simply has to happen. The Scottish Labour Party has to be more autonomous, not because of any self-interest as a party, but that because this will help us better represent people the length and breadth of the country. That's a good thing for Scotland.